So, we're gonna answer 2 questions in this PTR. How does the PTR feel? How does Season 2 feel? Does it feel like it's going the right direction for the game? Does everything feel nice and balanced? Does it feel fun, rewarding? And also, is it good for the game moving forward? Is it good for the future of the game? Are these good balance changes overall? I played about actually like 15 hours since release of the PTR. Blocking changes, alright? All weapons can block range attacks now, besides ADS weapons. So ADS weapons would be blunderbuss, musket, void gauntlet, and bow. For set percent of damage mitigation, right? So one hand is 30% mitigation, and 2 hand weapons is 60% mitigation. Not counting perks, right? There's some weapons that have perks that'll block more than others, but we're talking from just a standpoint, right? The stamina reduction when you attack with the ranged weapons to a melee weapon is literally unnoticeable. It's usually between around say 7 to 30 on melee light attacks and all ranged attacks. This is a change that is good, I think, for the overall health of the game, but it needs to be tweaked. I think the numbers are a little bit too low for how impactful your attacks should be. So for example, if I light attack somebody with my bow, it shouldn't be doing 600 damage just because it got blocked. So not only does block actually mitigate damage, it also mitigates any kind of buffs or debuffs, right? So if we're talking the fire staff, you light attack somebody, the smolder won't even apply. And we're going to talk about all the blocking changes and all the numbers in a second here. Blocking ranged attacks just doesn't feel too good right now. It feels way too overpowered, way too overtuned. But I think with the right number changes, it could be a great change for small scale. And melee will have a lot better for time versus ranged in 1v1 scenarios. You can also block all things, including burns, right? So we'll touch on that in a second here. And at a proper distance, you can even block AoEs, such as Pillar and Rain of Arrows. You have to position the abilities correctly for it to actually be blocked. It has to be placed in front of them. But if it's placed behind them, it'll go through the block. So that's kind of crazy. And what do we get from all this in conclusion? Empowering blocker is going to be absolutely essential in every build now. I'm sorry if you have your best in slot gloves, but that's going to have to go into the trash. Alright, get yourself an empowering blocker bis, empowering blocker resilient aversion, and you're good. You're set. The actual block damage calculator, so here as you can see, I'm going to put it on screen right here. And I'm not testing Void Blade because it's actually counted as a melee ability. Like we said, answering these 2 questions with the blocking changes up here, how does it feel? It feels like melee is a lot stronger and stands a lot better of a chance versus ranged players, especially light melees, especially medium melees, right? Because you can actually close distance and dodge abilities from the ranged attacks without having to use 40 stamina per roll, right? So essentially, I'm saying that if you're a melee player, say you're running 300 strength with Hardy, and also you're in light, every time somebody does like a ranged ability such as a pen shot or rapid shot, you have to roll through that, right? And you're losing 50 to even 100 stamina just to dodge rapid shot. And I feel like that was what made bows so hard to catch, because by the time you get close, they have decks, right? So they can roll like 4 times and you have no more stam left, right? Now, I'm sure that, there's a lot of gap closers in the game, so it's a little bit easier said than done. But I think in the scenarios where you don't have any gap closers and you are just looking straight at a bow, blocking is a good option. Now, is it good for the game moving forward? Yes, I think it is good overall for the game moving forward. I just think the damage numbers and the set mitigation and stamina damage all need to be worked around more, because I feel like it's a little bit overpowered right now. But as soon as they change up the numbers, maybe lower the mitigation a bit, maybe up the stam damage from ranged attacks, then I think it'll be in a very good state. Moving down to the Void Gauntlet change. I'm going to start with this and then go into the melee weapons, because this Void Gauntlet change is actually insane for new builds coming in Season 2. It's definitely going to be a very good secondary support DPS weapon, because it's going to be based around full utility. And what I mean by that is the biggest change that comes in Season 2 is tether doesn't get lost when switching weapons. Do you guys understand what this means? Tether not getting lost when switching weapons means your main hand, as long as you're within 20 meters and it's connected to the player, has a permanent 20% in power and also 20% weakens the enemy. So I think Void Gauntlet Rapier, Void Gauntlet Melee is going to be so strong next patch. But again, it does have its trade-offs, because there's no more mobility and you essentially don't have a secondary DPS weapon because it's full utility. But I think this allows for some crazy main weapon DPS builds such as VG Rapier, which I'll talk more a little bit later. But yeah, this Void Gauntlet change allows Void Gauntlet to be placed into the melee DPS meta, especially with light builds, because it has so much utility, right? You have Scream, you have Orb, Rupture, Tether, Oblivion. There's so many things you can choose from for your build that just feels really fresh for melee next season. Now, moving on to all the melee weapon changes, we have first is the sword and shield, right? They reworked Whirling Blade, they reworked Reverse Stab, they reworked Shield Rush Bash combo, and if you want, you can just read this here. Also defensive formation as well. Essentially, they just buffed, like they said they would, they buffed all the abilities that haven't been used, and they smoothed them out, they made them useful in PvP and PvE. So Sword and Shield is actually one of the strongest melee weapons at the moment. It has so much utility and tracking that it's so hard to get away from a Sword and Shield. So Sword and Shield is going to be very strong in the light DPS meta, which kind of sucks, but I feel like the trade-off is okay. They do need to do some tweaking with the debuffs and buffs and overall damage of the Sword and Shield. But is it good for the game? Yes. I think Whirling Blade, Reverse Stab, and defensive formation changes are extremely good because it makes them a lot more viable in every build. So Whirling Blade with the Rend, and now it has some utility. It also feels good to use. Same with Reverse Backstab. Can turn it when you're casting it so it doesn't lock you in place towards one direction. Shield Rush, Shield Bash. You can actually take the Shield Bash perks. And Defense Formation is huge. It's actually really big. Definitely the strongest light melee at the moment. Now, Warhammer, insane DPS buffs. Now, Gavel is actually good, and what this does is it allows you to now have 2 charges for Gavel, right? And they also up the weapon damage. What this means is light Warhammer builds are actually going to be viable with Hammer as the main DPS. I've tested this a little bit out in the arenas here, and it's super strong. It feels really strong to use, especially when you get your lockdown combos. So the Wrecking Ball into Gavel is extremely strong. It can literally like one-shot lights if you play enough strength. And essentially with the, yeah, like you said, Dusty, with the Refreshing Mighty Gavel perk, you have so many usages of Mighty Gavel that it feels like it's never on cooldown. What they did with Warhammer is they made Gavel a very, like, your main DPS for the build. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who are like happy about this. It's definitely gonna be funny when people get Wrecking Ball Mighty Gavel, and this could also potentially change the meta in the war scene. Maybe I'm not completely sure about that one yet. Like maybe like take out Path and put Gavel on for defense, specifically at gate defenses, and in fort defenses it could be good, but other than that we'll have to see how this pans out. But overall, a great change for the Warhammer. Definitely going to find its way into light melee builds as well. Great Axe DPS buffs as well, light melee DPS buffs, and also medium melee DPS buffs. The Reap buff is needed. Reap has been pretty weak for a while now. It's just the overall damage buff. And the Whirlwind buff promotes quicker gameplay and more damage, so light Gax is definitely a stronger option. Now, I do still think that Whirlwind, you need to have the Right Tree ultimate perk that stacks up to 10 in powers, because like that's the whole point of having Whirlwind. Essentially, you stack up your 10 stacks of, what is it called? You stack up your 10 perks of Mauler's Fury, and you get a total of 30% weapon damage on the Great Axe just from like a couple light attacks and the full Whirlwind, right? So I think this is great because you'll be able to chase down lights a lot easier now. It's very viable with the light melee build, right? So if you can play Great Axe Warhammer, you can play Great Axe Sword and Shield, whatever you want. Spear Cyclone. The Cyclone change is pretty good, but it's more of a good change for medium and heavies. I still feel like it's a little bit too slow for light players, but it's also really good for chase now. I think if you're playing a lockdown spear build, you want Cyclone in your kit now, which changes up some build diversity, right? So you probably want something like Skewer, a Cyclone Sweep or something like that. But again, really good for light melees and medium melees as well. Great Sword, they nerfed Skyward Slash range, which is good because Skyward Slash, the range forcing you to roll twice was a little bit too strong. Feels nice now. It doesn't feel like it's a ranged ability anymore. As for Rapier, they did change Flurry a little bit. They tried to change the tracking for it, but honestly, it still kind of feels pretty bad. When I was testing it, it could be because my ping is high. I play on 100 ping on the PTR. I feel like it has some potential maybe in like melee matchups specifically, but sometimes I feel like Evade Flourish Flesh is just way better in PvP. Now, like I said, I won't be going into anything build wise because a lot could change from this iteration to the live version, and also my gear on PTR is really bad, so I can't say 100%, but the tracking overall is not the worst thing, but it's also not the best either. We'll have to see how it goes. Now, they also smooth in the gameplay overall with the VG Rapier, which is actually my new main build, because VG Rapier is insane. Like VG Rapier, it feels so good, it feels so smooth and fluid, so I'm definitely gonna enjoy that a lot. The Tondo buff makes it feel a lot stronger for PvE and PvP. Essentially what they did is they removed the distance you need to be for Tondo to do more direct damage, and instead just place it like, oh, if they already have a Rapier bleed, then it'll do 100% more damage. Now this is a very good buff for PvE specifically because you're always going to be close to the target, and also good for PvP because you don't have that conditional anymore. So maybe that'll allow more Tondo Flourish and Finish builds, but we'll have to see. Now for Hatchet, Raging Torrent tracking is actually very viable now. Essentially what they did is they slowed down the ability, but they increased the tracking. So now it feels like all 4, or even like if you take the last brick, all 5 attacks can connect on a target that doesn't roll, and it feels like it's really good for chase now. I think Raging Torrent could be a really good option for Hatchet, especially on melee DPS. The rend is absolutely insane on rending throw. Wow, they buffed it. 10 to 20%, a 20% rend on a throwing ability is absolutely insane. Now mind you, it is single target, so that kind of balances out, but 20% rend is going to be nuts versus like a melee matchup or when you're chasing a player. So very good utility changes, right? Now they also did some other throwing hatchetry changes. So they did a visual change to disease throw, which is whatever, and they removed the condition for how close enemies have to be for the root. So essentially what that means is if you're a melee player with hatchet and somebody gets close to you and you're trying to run away, you can actually throw the social distance and it'll root them in place no matter the distance. They also buffed some damage here and there as well, but you know, mainly hatchet, throwing tree, and Raging Torrent are going to feel a lot better in season 2. Again, moving back up to the question, right? All these melee weapon changes, right? How does it feel? All of these weapons feel like each ability they have now is unique and is good for different builds. Essentially what they did with this season is they made all the worthless abilities that in PvP and PvE, and they buffed them, right? They buffed them and they made them stronger. It allows for more build diversity as well. So is it good for the game moving forward? Yes. I think these changes will solidify and give each ability an identity in whatever build you want to play, and I think that's a great thing. Obviously there's some tweaks that still need to happen, but I think they're on a great track towards overall flow with melee combat in the game. Moving down, we have range slash magic weapon changes. Okay, first things first, the bow. The bow is in a very interesting spot right now in the PTR, but what it did do is it opened up a lot of new potential skill trees. And I don't know if you guys have seen my season 1 bow best slot build and guide, but that's gonna be completely broken. Like, I had to make a brand new video. Don't go watch that. I might just remove it completely off the channel because it is just not good anymore. The entire skill tree is going to change next patch, and that's due to the evasion being on the left side ultimate, right? The evasive tactics, 50% damage buff on roll. So there's a lot of changes coming to the skill tree and the overall gameplay of the bow. Now, there's one change that I would really like for AGS to do, and that is the Rain of Arrows change. Essentially what they did is they buffed how fast it drops, but they didn't buff how long it takes to charge up. So essentially it still takes really long to charge up. I think for the flow of the bow, I think they should make it a lot faster, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens to it. The haste nerfs are good. I feel like the haste nerfs are good because 10% uptime on haste permanently is absolutely insane for a weapon. It does feel really good still because you still have haste when you roll on 100 stam, but you don't have permanent haste. So like I said, that'll allow for a different kind of playstyle and a lot of different thinking for the bow. Now I won't go too deep into the bow skill tree. I'll have to make a full other video regarding bow rapier and bow in general, but we're not gonna go too deep for now. Life staff, healers may be more focused on blocking this season, which I think could potentially add a healer skill gap, because healers knowing when to block like ranged attacks or melee players is actually pretty insane, right? So we'll have to see how that changes. Now, the splash change. I haven't gotten to test this yet because it's, you know, there's no wars or large scale. This will change the war meta like very significantly. Essentially what they did is they removed the range from 100 to 25 meters, I believe 25 meters. And you have to play so much closer with your healer now for it to be any good at all. Now, in return for the distance change, they did buff it. They like increased the overall healing rate of it. But this is going to change a lot for war because life staffs and healers are going to have to play a lot closer to the fights. So we'll just have to see how that goes if people even want to run life staff anymore. Or sorry, splash anymore. VG, we already covered. It's just the tether changes. Going to change a lot up with secondary DPS support builds. Ice Gauntlet. Wow. This patch makes blocking so strong with this weapon. Like, you can literally block a bow shot and it does no stamina damage and no damage. So it's actually insane. Blocking is going to be such an insane skill gap on Ice Gauntlet specifically because, wow, it's so good with the passive. I don't know if you guys know what the passive is, but if you don't, essentially what it does, it converts stamina to mana when you block. So what that means is when you block, instead of losing stamina, you lose mana instead. So that's actually gonna be insane for in like 1v1 and small scale, and even in like group fights too. We'll have to see how it's used, but I think this block change is insane. We'll have to see how strong it really is and how much tweaks they do to each ability's stamina damage. Now, Wind Chill buff isn't bad. I think it's okay for IG melee, but like, you know, nobody really plays Wind Chill. I still don't think Wind Chill is coming into the meta because the other abilities are just way too strong. Fire Staff, Pillar nerf is fine. I feel like the weapon is very balanced. Let's not nerf Fire Staff anymore, okay? Like, honestly, I think this Pillar nerf is okay, but no more than this, or else the weapon's gonna feel too weak. Especially considering the fact that you can block all the debuffs from Fire Staff, like the Smolder and the Bird, just from pressing right click on any weapon, is very dumb. And I think there needs to be some changes with that, especially with abilities. Like maybe abilities apply Smolder and Bird, but light attacks and heavy attacks don't. That's kind of dumb, and I feel like they might need to tweak that a little bit. But the power of Fire Staff is pretty solid. Still pretty solid in Season 2. It's definitely going to be still ran in OPRs and Wars, maybe not as much. Now, Blunderbuss, they just made a lot of bug fixes that did more weapon damage than necessary. So like the Empowering Breaker getting 5 stacks in one shot is absolutely absurd. They changed that. But it's still very strong in the melee meta because Blunderbuss counters melee if you're good. Anybody that comes up to you, you can just easily ice wall into a grenade's blast shot, or sorry, shrapnel shot. So Blunderbuss is still very strong in this patch. Musket actually got insane buffs this patch. So essentially what they did is you don't have to reload or load the special shots into the musket. So you can see here, all you have to do is press the button and it'll go into the musket instantly. So what that does is you can literally powder shot, roll, power shot within 1 second, and it's actually disgusting. And especially with shooter stance too, you can go into shooter stance and you can shoot the power shot, powder burn, etc, so fast. So I think musket got a huge buff this patch, and if you like musket, you might want to try this out because it feels like the power of musket just got upped a lot. And I think it's a really good change. We'll have to see though. As for the new arena map, alright, new arena map and overall arena quality of life changes. The map isn't bad. I honestly really like it, but just for my playtime, I have a lot to test out still to see which builds are good. But it has really good diversity, right? The visuals are amazing as well, and the drops are actually good, so you now get a specific arena crate drop, which has a lot of named items as well as some other things as well. I like that this map doesn't cater towards any build in the game, right? So ranged doesn't feel too broken on this map. It feels like every class you can play well as long as you know how to maneuver around the map, which is exactly what they need in an arena. So the map design isn't bad, but we'll just have to see how the meta pans out and see the flaws that come out. But right now, I really like the map. It's really fun too. There's a lot of funny things you can do with this arena. Jumping, parkouring is really fun. Love to see more arena maps. Just from this first arena map they've done, like they've really worked on and tried, they have a lot of potential for more, especially with all the things in the open world that already look like arena maps. I love the theme, great for all builds, and we'll have to see more from it in the future, especially on live servers. Now, PvP track. PvP track, the changes for this, holy. PvP track is actually so good now. Like every single track I've gotten has either been a named item, a useful resource, or a really good 3-perker. And I'm just like, how? Like like how did they make it so much better than before? Like I really think the PvP track is actually worth it and has potentially good gear and best in slot, and that's really rewarding as a PvP player. You can do arenas, you can do OPR, you still get the crates, and your PvP track is insane. So there's so many ways to get good PvP gear now that it feels like the gate for getting into PvP with gear has been lowered a lot. Now, like there's always gonna be meta and like the best kind of builds and stuff, the best kind of perks you want. This allows for a lot more diversity and a lot of more balanced PvP gameplay. So it doesn't feel like when you're just in 2 perks and it's really boring because you can't get your 3rd perks and you lose a lot of values. So overall, very good changes. Now, faction vendors, they did make the ultimate trophy change. This combines 3 mages into 1 ultimate, allowing for more trophies and housings, which is really good because you don't have to keep running from time to time every time the mutation changes to change your trophies. Now you can just have all 9 ultimate trophies in all 3 of your houses, right? The only thing is it is pretty expensive, like something like 45,000 coins plus a lot of faction tokens. I mean, I guess that kind of makes it more rewarding in a way when you do grind out for one. makes it feel a little more important, and it adds more grind to the game. I would say they should probably adjust it a little bit because 45,000 is a little much, but we'll kind of have to wait and see until everything pans out. As for new gear, I don't know if it's good or not. I haven't been able to test it. I'm not going to go to track 5. Now, I know a lot of people were asking for like faction vendor PvP gear, but honestly, with the PvP track and all the crates you get, I feel like faction vendors having a set good gear kind of just completely negates anything from the PvP track and the boxes you get. So I think this is fine. I don't think they need to add any like PvP set gears that are like 3 perk bis, because that would completely ruin the experience of the game. So overall, faction vendors are pretty useful. Back to the top question again. How does it feel? It feels like PvP is rewarding. It feels like arenas and PvP is fresh again. It feels like there's a lot of build diversity, and it feels like there's a lot of good changes overall, right? The trophy thing is good too. I'm not much of a PvEer, but I know people are gonna be happy at that. Is it good for the game moving forward? Extremely good. Extremely good for the game moving forward. And I feel like this is only the start of a lot of big things for New World, specifically more arena maps, more diversity, better gear drops, and the flow is very, very nice. Now moving down to the Hatchery trial. This is the 10-man raid that we did with a couple other people. I did it actually with the Whelps, Male Oreo, Kier, and a couple other of my boys to help me out. And this is my thoughts on it. We completed it in the first hour on the first iteration of the PTR. I think we were the world's first to beat it. Some things I have to say about it is the trash waves were very boring and uninspiring. Like, it felt like they could literally just remove the first 4 waves and the trial would be just as fun and just as rewarding and just as good. But you know, I guess there's trash mobs, right? I feel like if they added threatening mobs or make them feel like they do more damage, then it could be fun. But right now, trash mobs are very boring. Essentially, there's 5 waves, and on Wipe, you start at boss wave if you get to him, right? Wave 5 is the boss wave, and the boss is actually pretty hard, and it has some good mechanics. Total boss encounter was also 7 minutes. I would say this isn't like the greatest boss design or trial design ever, but I do think it's a good start. So I'll talk about that in a second here. The arena was a bit small and uninspiring though. Like, it could be more dynamic. It was very boring. It's fine because if they're focused more on gameplay than like the actual like design of the map and focus more on mechanics, I think it's okay. But in the future, I would like to see like better environment overall, because it just made me feel like I was just in an arena, man. It was very boring, but that's okay because it made up for the unique mechanics, right? Unique mechanics. It made the gameplay fun, and each player had a role and position, which was kind of important. So what I mean by that is every like DPS classes had a use, healers had a use. It was important to know where you were positioned depending on the mechanic that was happening, and it felt like coordination was pretty important. Now my group of 10 was honestly really good players, so we didn't need much because we all like kind of figured it out in the end, and it was pretty easy to figure out mechanics. It was nothing like Destiny or anything. It was still a good starter raid for the very first raid ever. Now, overall difficulty. This has been the hardest boss in the game that I've come across amongst every dungeon and open world boss mechanically, but also it's easy to understand. And what I mean by that is there's no like super in-depth thing. You know, there's only a couple mechanics which I actually won't go to depth because I don't want to spoil too much, but it's very easy to notice them, and once you do and get a grasp on them, it feels like you're learning, and it feels very fun. An amazing raid boss starter for the first one, right? I expect more difficulty in the worm trial. I expect a lot more difficulty actually, since they said something like, oh, nobody's gonna beat it for the first week besides 100 people. So overall difficulty on a scale of like Destiny, Final Fantasy, World of Warcraft, all of the different raids I played, all the way from ultimates to the hard dungeons and WoW to like day 1 Destiny raids, I have to give it like a solid 5 out of 10. Now that's not how good the raid is. I'm just saying the overall difficulty. I'll give it like a 5 out of 10 because it's honestly not too difficult because I've done things like ultimates and day 1 Destiny raids, but it's still hard enough that I had to like really focus on my gameplay. Because of that, I do want to say the overall fun of the raid is, I'll say, is like around an 8 or 9. And the reason I say that is because even though it's short-lived, I think doing the raid itself was really fun. I think the mechanics were interesting, and I think that the boss is cool. It didn't feel like the mechanics were too frustrating. Essentially, it doesn't feel like it's thwarting the game's fun, if that makes sense. Because it definitely matters that it's hard, but it matters more that it's fun. Does that make sense? So I give it like an 8 or 9. Yeah, exactly, Tuco. So easy but fun isn't a bad combo. If only 1% of the server they can do it, they've kind of failed. Yeah, exactly. So I think that mechanically, things like Destiny does raids, in my opinion, the best in day 1s. They make the raids hard, but they make the mechanics kind of easy to understand, and they make the gameplay fun. It doesn't feel like you're just treading through. It feels like, oh, this is really fun. I can play this raid for 8 hours straight even if I don't beat it. I love this raid. Like, it just feels so fresh. It feels so fun. All these new mechanics and stuff, right? And New World's raid was kind of like that, the hatchery, but it was more on the easy side than anything. So I feel like they've got a long ways to go there. Fun starter raid. Very good for the game, and good for the game moving forward, and it feels really good. Now the reward system, they have some set OPR, they have some sets that could potentially be good in Season 3. None of them have resilient, but you know, with the perk changes, I do think this gear is going to be really good for Season 3. So I highly recommend when this raid comes out, you farm out the gear. And the fact that you can also change the attributes is really nice, so you can do whatever you want. But I think the light armor with freedom aversion, I forgot what it was. But all the set armors from heavy, medium, and light look really good. Now, OPR changes. This one is actually massive, bro. So with the new raid changes, you can't queue with 20, you can only queue with 5 still. But you can see all the players' names on the left side. You can see 20 people, bro. You can see all 20 people, and as soon as you open the map, you can see where everyone is. So that's extremely good for the quality of OPR. So I'm not just running around like, oh, where's everybody at? Like, where's everybody fighting at, you know? I can see where my team is playing now, which is a very good change. I really love that. I really think that's a great change for OPR. Now, the new PvE event, I haven't gotten to try it myself because it never pops. Heard it promotes a new area to fight for, like an objective, which I think is good. Running to midpoints from start is very boring, and there's like not much you can do besides Baron, so that could be good too. It could like lessen the clump fights and make more like small scale fights than anything. It could potentially spark like some group play where like, oh, send 5 people here, send 5 people there, but we'll just have to see how that plays out. Because it's never like that, right? I think the only thing that did it really well like that was Warsong Gulch, World of Warcraft Classic. Because Warsong Gulch, people would actually try and coordinate, and you could see people on the map, you can see where people are. To have your team, like to have enough players on one point so that it's not like overwhelming, but also protect others as well. But Warsong Gulch did it really well, and I hope they pull a lot more from there. There's also gonna be a lot more build variety because of all the changes, and I'm hoping that there's less range meta. Now, I'm not saying I want everybody to be on melee, but I feel like, especially recently, it feels like everybody plays range and it's very boring. Hope it makes it fun, because right now I just hate queuing OPR. I cannot stand queuing OPR on live right now. It just feels like an absolute Zerg fest where one team gets clowned on and camped in spawn. OPRs end in like 5 minutes, and it's just very boring. The new HEARTRUNE, the Sandworm HEARTRUNE. I think this HEARTRUNE has a place. I do still have to test it a little more, but the Sandworm, the knockdown one specifically feels nice because it has a lot of utility. As for the damage of the HEARTRUNE itself, I don't think it does enough damage. I think actually only one Sandworm is good right now, which is the knockdown one that gives you an uninterruptible for 5 seconds. But the one that gives you 200% weapon damage on it, it still only does like 2 to 3k damage, and it's not worth it as a HEARTRUNE because of how small the radius is. Now, they could do a lot of changes there. Same with the poisoning. Like, who cares about a 15% damage poison on a HEARTRUNE? Like, I still think that's also very bad. Again, we'll have to see. There's just other options right now that are better. There's just better options. I do think it's good for the game though, because it feels fun and new. And the fact that it's a ranged knockdown ability that anybody can have, and it looks so cool. How do I feel about the state of New World, specifically retaining PvP? The melee meta. Melee meta is gonna come in like a truck, bro. Everybody's gonna be on melee for a while. There's gonna be so many more melee builds, so much diversity that it's gonna be kind of overwhelming. As for bow, the bow nerfs are insane too. It's gonna feel like, I'm sure there's gonna be a lot less bows on live as well, unless they change some things, but bow's still gonna be a popular choice. It's just not gonna be nearly as good as it was as it is in the live server right now, but honestly that's fine because bow has been strong for so long. I hope they do some adjustments to all the weapons, but right now it's okay. Fire staff also still very good in group play, still really high damage. It's moving more into a melee meta. There's gonna be a lot more build variety, which is nice. Same thing with PvE. PvE is gonna be some more variety in builds, along with a lot of changes benefit PvE as well. So like, you know, the whirling blade giving a 15% rend, or bow having a rending headshot. It's just some things like that that might change it up a little bit, make it more exciting and ready for the worm patch. And I'm just gonna say right now, how do I feel about Season 2? Season 2 This PTR, the first iteration right now, not including the other things like here, transmog, 20-man raid worm, first light changes, and cross with OPR. This has been the most fun OPR I've played in so long. Like, I've never played a more fun OPR, honestly. Like, season 1 was okay, but it was more about fire staff, and flame kick was kind of underwhelming. The dungeon was whatever. But man, I've literally been on PTR since it dropped because there's so much to do and there's so many new things, and it's just really fun, man. So I'm gonna have to say all of these changes, including quality of life, including PvE, including PvP, I'm gonna have to give it like an 8 out of 10. So I'm really excited for season 2, man. Season 2 drop is potentially gonna bring in a lot of players. Nothing crazy though. I say like maybe a couple thousand, maybe less. This is a great patch and direction for the game moving forward. And this changes a lot of things that people have been wanting for like literally 2 years, bro. Like, yeah, people can be like, oh, 2 years too late. Like, oh, like, who cares, bro? We're here now. This is today. This is all coming out in like a month. And I think New World is headed towards a really bright future if they can keep up these really good changes and keep increasing how much content they have, on and on and on, right? I truly believe that. I really think like the dev team has, like you said, bro, they're not giving up on this game anytime soon. I'm gonna believe that, whether it's cope or not, you know. Just from what I've played, it feels good. It feels good as a hardcore PvPer. It feels good as a casual player. It feels good as a PvE player. Everybody gets a new build. Everybody has more theory crafting to do. And this is just the first iteration. We have so much more to come. So I think season 2 is gonna be an insane amount of content, and I'm really hyped for that. But there are still some things I think should change here. So we have Rain of Arrows, right? The Rain of Arrows cast time needs to change. It's way too slow. It feels clunky. It doesn't feel good with the bow gameplay. Another thing is attunement drops on weapons. Because attunement is just such a strong thing right now, I feel like this should be required. Or instead of just requiring it, instead of having attunement drop on items, maybe nerf or rework attunement completely. But we'll have to see how that goes as well. And also another thing I didn't add is resilient changes. I want them. I know all the perk changes and stuff come out in season 3. But I want them to change resilient so it's not necessary in your armor. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't keep rolling resilient, because potentially resilient could still be the best in slot perk. But I think it's important to get this set and to have it ready to go if they do rework resilient, because it's only been hinted at and it's not confirmed yet. So I'm not saying jump off the bus and just screw resilient. Everybody drop resilient. Let's start crafting through purpose. No, I say just grind this raid out, get that gear, just in case they do change it, so you're ready and you're set for season 3. Yeah, because honestly right now it's all just speculation for season 3. We'll have to wait and see. I'm definitely grinding the raid. I'm definitely grinding the raid because I think that gear would be really solid if they change resilient, and it's just gonna be nice to have. So yeah, I believe that's everything we've covered so far. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to subscribe. We're almost at 1,000 here. I did so much testing, and I hope this clears up any ideas or any like confusion you had about the PTR and season 2 coming. And yeah, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and yeah, peace out.